What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video tutorial here on the Coders channel. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about something that I've been struggling to find information on over the past few days. Now, the topic in particular is related to the Google OAuth 2.0 API. For those of you that don't know what the OAuth API is, this video probably isn't for you just yet, but to give a brief explanation, the OAuth API allows a user to connect to a specific site or service, authenticate a specific application, such as an application that we're developing, and allow the application to perform restricted operations on behalf of the user without that user being present. Now, Google provides their own OAuth 2.0 API, and unfortunately those access tokens that are generated by Google expire after 1 hour. Now, there's no way that we can change this as developers. There's no way that we can extend this time. They just have a 1 hour lifespan. Now, fortunately, Google does provide a way to allow developers to regenerate that access token without bugging the user every hour, and they do this in the form of a refresh token. So Google provides a refresh token which is similar to the access token, but instead it's used to regenerate an access token. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of information and documentation available online. Over the past few days I've been trying to work with this particular aspect of the OAuth API, and I really struggled to find information. I didn't find any information on Google's website apart from what a refresh token was. I didn't find any information on how to actually implement this feature into a C# Universal Windows Platform application, whether that be on the Google website or Stack Overflow. I couldn't find anything on Reddit. I couldn't find anything on Yahoo Answers. There was pretty much no information at all, so I had to figure it out by myself. So the reason I'm making this video is so you don't have the same brick walls that I had. Hopefully I can clarify exactly what the refresh token is and how to use it in this video, and I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible. So first of all, let's just go ahead and go to the Google API Explorer. So you can type this in on Google, but the link will be in the video description, and it's developers.google.com/APIs-explorer. Ignore the hashtag P at the end of the URL. So if we scroll down the API Explorer, we can see all the different APIs that Google provides, and there's a wide array of different APIs for different tasks and features of Google. But we're particularly going to concentrate on the OAuth API. So we scroll down, we see Google OAuth 2 API, and a brief description: it obtains end-user authorization grants for use with other Google APIs. So in summary, the OAuth API is used in conjunction with any other Google API to provide a way, kind of like a bridge between a user and an application, or the user's Google account and an application. So it allows us to make authenticated calls on behalf of that user. So we click on that, and as you can see, we've got 4 different options here. So we've got Get Cert for OpenID Connect. I'm not 100% sure what that is yet, so I'm not going to go over that. We've got Token Info, which just provides information about a token. We've got userinfo.get and userinfo.v2.me.get. So we're going to use the fields editor here, and we're going to select all of these. So we're going to ask Google to provide all of this information. Now, I don't mind showing my information because, of course, my information is public anyway. So we're going to go authorize and execute, and you see it asks us to select specific OAuth 2.0 scopes. We're going to keep these as the default for now, but just to give you an overview of what these are. So the plus.login allows us to log into our Google Plus account. The plus.me allows us to show information about our profile. Userinfo.email allows the application to view your email address, and userinfo.profile allows the application to view your basic profile info. So we're going to click authorize and execute, and you'll see a little window pops up. This allows us to log in to the Google API Explorer So in this case, Google APIs Explorer is the application, and we're providing access to our account. So we're going to select this account, and you'll see it provides us with the request URL, and then it obviously allows us to put an API key there. I'll show you how to use this in a C# environment. And then the JSON response gives us information where we can pass that information and provide it to the application. So let's go ahead and close this for now. I'm going to go ahead and open Visual Studio 2017. And we're going to start off by creating a blank app. We're going to use Windows Universal and the blank app template. And just for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll just call this tutorial. Click OK. And we'll leave these target and minimum versions as default for now. If you want more information on this, just click on this little link in the bottom left hand corner of the dialog window that pops up. Click OK. And that will take a few minutes to create, of course. We can go ahead and close the splash screen or the welcome page and double click to open mainpage.xaml or mainpage.xaml. Alright, so you can see we've got a blank template here, and we're going to start off by adding a few controls to the XAML page. So we're going to use XAML programming for this. As you can see, I like to close the preview pane because it makes it a little bit easier for my eyes to work with. Alright, so we're going to add a few controls. So first of all, we're going to need a button, but first of all we're going to just make this make everything align properly. So we're going to add some grid rows. So we'll add grid.row definitions, and you can see the tags are automatically closed. So inside this grid.row definitions tag, we're going to say row definition height equals 100 pixels, and then we're going to add another one, row definition height equals start, to use the rest of the page. So we've got two rows, and first of all we're going to add a button. So we're going to say button x name equals connect button, grid.row equals 0 for the top row, horizontal alignment equals left, margin equals 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, content equals connect to Google, and then we'll close that tag off. Or we'll actually add some different things. So we'll go font family equals Consolus, which is a nice font that's easy on the eyes. Font size equals 12. Foreground equals dark blue, and then we'll leave it at that. So we'll just go ahead and view that, fit all, and you can see we've got the button there. Now we need to add a tapped event to this, so we'll say tapped equals and then new event handler, and we'll change this to connect to Google, and we'll just press F7 and change the event handler there. So we'll add a little summary to this so we know what it does. It's always good to add comments. Okay, so we're going to get rid of these default comments that Microsoft leave here because these really annoy me. So you can see we've got our tapped event here for the button. Next, let's go ahead and add a text box, which is going to act as a sort of a console window. So we're going to say text box x name equals console out, grid.row equals 1, horizontal alignment equals stretch, vertical alignment equals stretch, background equals black, foreground equals white smoke, font family equals consolus, font size equals 12, accept return. Now this is so as we can use this as multi-line. Accept return equals true, and then just close that off like so. So you can see we've got a console window here, and whoops, we also need to add a margin. So margin equals 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, and 10 pixels. Now this is of course not necessary. I know you're just waiting to see the code behind, but I like to make things look as good as possible. Alright, so we've got our connect button and we've got our console output window. So next we're going to go ahead and actually get into some real coding. So the first thing we need to do is we need to redirect the user to the Google server. So, but we also need our client ID. Now of course I'm going to have to blur this out because I don't want anyone using my own client ID, but we need to add some declarations just above the constructor. So let's hide this constructor first. Let's say region constructor. And then end the region just below there. And that will hide that. We'll add another region here for declarations. Okay, so I will add my client ID later, so I don't have to keep blurring it out every time I pass that. But for a brief overview, we are going to create 5 strings. So the first one, of course, is going to be the client ID. This is what allows us to connect our application to Google. So I will go over how to generate that client ID in a little while, but for now we're just going to create the actual code. The second string we create is called a redirect URI. Now this redirect URI might look a little bit strange, but essentially what this is we need to register a protocol through our application to allow us to provide a link to Google, and then when Google tries to redirect back to the application, it will launch the protocol and that will tell Windows to open our application. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in a minute. The next one is called the authorization endpoint. Now this is provided by Google, and this is a standard URL. I will provide all of the information in the description. The next is the token endpoint. So this is another one provided by Google. And then there's the user info endpoint. Now the authorization endpoint is the URL which we redirect the user to start with, and this basically starts the authorization. The token endpoint is the URL where we obtain the token, the access token and the refresh token, and the user info is where we obtain the actual user information. Alright, next we need to create some sort of a local storage to store the refresh token and access token. So we're going to say application data container local settings, and excuse me, just change that, equals application data dot current dot local settings, and we'll close that off with a semicolon. And you can see that there's an error here, so we can just hover over here, click show potential fixes, and select the top one, which is using windows.storage. This will automatically provide the import that we need to be able to use this particular Windows API. So as you can see, the error's gone. It's added a new using statement there, and we can continue. Alright, so the next thing we're going to need is some code provided by Google. This is primarily used for encryption, and it's required by Google for all of their data. It needs to be encrypted. So we're going to start by adding a new region at the bottom. Google encryption jargon. You don't actually need to do this, it's just that it keeps the code nice and clean. And inside this region, you'll see I've pasted a few different functions. You'll see some errors, again, just show potential fixes, and just select the import statement that it offers. Show potential fixes, and finally, there we go. So you'll see it's added a couple of new imports. We've got windows.security.cryptography, security.cryptography.core, and I think that's it. There may have been another one. Windows.storage.streams, that was it, and windows.storage. So that's all of the imports done for now. We will need to add a few more later. Alright, so next we're going to create the function to forward the user to Google. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to register a protocol. So double click on the package.app manifest or Apex manifest and select declarations. On the available declarations, scroll down to protocol and click add, and you'll see a couple of different fields that may be a little bit daunting, but the first one, of course, is the display name. That is not required, but it allows Windows to tell the user what application the protocol is associated with. So we're just going to call this UWP application tutorial, and we're going to copy the protocol from up here. And we're going to paste that into there. Okay, so under the name we've got win.thecoder.emp. Now of course this is a protocol that I'm already using on an application of mine, but I do have to uninstall my application because otherwise the protocol will clash. But you can see it says win.thecoder.emp. Now win.thecoder is a domain name that I own called thecoder.win. It's just a personal domain I use for development purposes. It's not a live website. And .emp is basically just Easy Media Player, which is an application I'm working on, as you can see from my wallpaper. So you can call this whatever you like, as long as the domain matches in the Google developers console. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. So we're going to save that for now, so Control and S. And it also needs to match here, apart from the :/OAuth2 redirect. That is required, of course. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a couple of functions, or add a function in the app.xaml.cs. So click on app.xaml and press F7. That will take you to the app.xaml.cs code. And we're going to go down to the bottom here, and we're going to create a new function. So we're going to go protected override void unactivated. So we're going to get rid of that. And then we just need to determine whether the activation kind is a protocol. So we're going to use an if statement, and we're going to say if args.kind equals activation kind dot protocol. So if the activation kind is a protocol, then we need to just declare a few things, and I'm actually going to copy and paste this to save a little bit of time, and I'll explain it afterwards. So protocol activated event args, protocol args equals, and then we cast to the protocol activated event args and declare the args parameter that we have in the unactivated override. We declare a new URI and add that URI and declare that as protocol.args.uri, so the URI that's provided when the application is activated. We declare a new frame, and then we navigate to the main page with URI as the parameters provided while navigating, and then we activate that frame. So it's as simple as that. We can close that now. We are done with the app.xaml.cs page. Alright, so back on the main page.xaml.cs, we again need to use an override for the OnNavigated To event, and this is in conjunction with the app.xaml that we've just done. So we're going to say a new region, activation events. I'm going to say end region. Whoops, mess that up a little bit. And then we're going to paste in the OnNavigated To code here. So you can see there's quite a bit of code here. Now, of course, I'm copying this from the code that I've used myself. So I'm going to clean it up as I go along and show you what we're doing and try and explain it as best I can. So first of all, we determine whether the parameter that we've provided by the app.xaml is a URI, and if it is, then we run this code in here. Otherwise, we do nothing. So I don't need that because I don't need to do any debugging here. So first of all, we declare a new string called query string, and we take that query from the authorization response that we've provided from app.xaml when the activation event occurs. And this code here is provided by Google. There's a link to Stack Overflow here. I've never visited that link, so I don't know what's on there. Next, we use an if statement to determine whether the query string parameters contains an error key or text that says error, so a key called error. If it does, then there's a problem somewhere and we need to let the user know. So what we need to do there is we need to basically let the user know that an error's occurred and that they can't be logged in, and then we just return and break out of the code the if statement. Alright, so I'm going to clean this bit up first of all, and I'm actually going to create a new function, so we'll just minimize that there. Okay, so we create a new function here called show message on screen. Console.out.text equals console.out.text plus environment.newline plus message. Whoops. Yep, that's right. Okay, so what this will do is it will just simply save us having to write this every time we want to output some new text into the console, and we'll just call this function with a message inside the function, and it will print out on the console.out.text. It will print out what's already there plus a new line and then the new message. So that just adds to simplicity. So we're going to say if the query string parameters contains an error, then we're going to add this error. So show message on screen and then the error inside that function. Okay, so then all we've got to do is just change all of these output data.text to show message on screen. I'll change that to that to make that proper, and I'll explain all of this in a minute what's actually going on, because obviously this is going to be daunting to a lot of people. But first of all, I'm just trying to clean it up so there's no errors. And I need to ignore this one for a minute because we need to create that function in a minute. Alright, so inside the OnNavigated To override, we first of all determine whether there's a error key inside the response. If there is, we need to show a message. And then the second part is if the query string params.contained key code, but with this little exclamation mark at the front of the if statement, it's saying if it does not contain a code. So if it was just like that without the exclamation point, it would say if the query string params.contained key code. But we want to determine whether it does not, so we added the exclamation point there. So if it does not contain a key called code, or if it does not contain a key called state, then there's another error. So I don't know why that's like that, so we'll just straighten that out. Then it's going to show another message on screen, OAuth error, an error occurred while attempting to obtain the authorization code. The response code was malformed. So if it doesn't contain the code or the state, then it's a malformed response and we should break out of the operation. If neither of these are true, or if there's no error and it does contain the code and state, so it's got to contain both of them, then it will run this code here. So we put the code that's been provided into a new string. We also put the incoming state into a new string. So query string params.state or state. We also store the expected state into the local settings. So the reason that we do this is so as we can send the code exchange to Google. We send the expected state along with that, and then Google sends that expected state back. And if the two states don't match, if the expected state and the return state don't match, then we know that there's a problem somewhere and that the response hasn't come from Google. So that's another thing that Google requires. And then of course, as I just explained, if the incoming state does not match the expected state, then we show another error. An error occurred while attempting to obtain the authorization code. The incoming state did not match the expected state. Alright, so if the incoming state matches the expected state, then we nullify the local settings state setting, and we store the authorization code for later use. We also store the code verifier in a string. So the next part you'll see has an error called perform code exchange async, and then we pass on the code and the code verifier to that function. So we're going to create that function there. This is another function created by Google which exchanges the code that we've got at the minute with a access token and a refresh token. Alright, so next we need to actually perform the code exchange. Now, as I said, what this does is it sends the code that we've just received back from Google back to Google again, along with the code verifier, and exchanges it for an access token. So we're going to go ahead and create that function there. This is another function provided by Google, and it's pretty much a default code, apart from I've got to clean it up. So first of all, I'm going to change this to show message on screen. And we're going to just going to get rid of these errors by adding, of course, the using imports. And then we're going to add another show message on screen. We're going to add another import here for Windows JSON. and I will go through this as I did earlier. I'm just going to clean it up. Unfortunately, I didn't prepare for this video, I just thought I'd do it. Alright, so let's explain what this actually does. So the first thing we're doing is telling the user that we're performing the code exchange. So that just outputs that into the text box. The next thing we're going to do is build a new string. So this string is basically going to take a couple of different variables. So the variables are provided here. So it's going to take the code that's been sent from Google, the code verifier, the client ID, the scopes, and the grant type. And the access type. So the grant type is going to be set to authorization code, and that's because we want the OAuth access token. And the access type is going to be set to offline because we want to receive a refresh token along with it. So there are a few different ways that you can do this. You can of course just build a standard string without these enclosing brackets and things like that. You can input this in manually in this one string, or you can do it a few different ways. For now, we're going to do it the way that Google tells us to do it. So the next thing we do is we create a new string content with the token request body, which is this string we've just built. We set the encoding type to UTF-8, which is required by Google, and we set the content type to application/xwww form URL encoded, which is the encoding type for posted data. So we're essentially posting a form to Google. You can't use a GET request, you have to use a POST request. So next we create a new HTTP client handler, and we allow auto redirect, so we can redirect automatically. Next we create a HTTP client, which is essentially a hidden web browser, and then we exchange the code for tokens. So we post the content to the token endpoint. So the token endpoint, as I explained earlier in the declarations, is the v4 token. That's where we're going to get the token from, and then we provide the content, which is this here plus this here. Alright, so next thing we need to do is grab the response string. So we read the response content as a string asynchronously, and we say if the response is not a success status code. So if we get an error code of any sort, such as a 404 error, a 500 error, a 400 error, things like that, then we have to tell the user. So we pop up a little error message on the screen and tell the user that the response code returned an error. We can of course just add this as a message on the output window, but it alerts the user a lot better if we pop up an error message. If the response returns a success status code, then we output the response string to the output console. Okay, so next we need to set the authentication header of the HTTP client using the acquired access token. So we pass the response string using JSON, using a JSON object, and we extract the access token and the refresh token from that. So we get a name string called access token and refresh token, and then we store those different pieces of data in the local storage for the application. We also need to obtain the expiry time, so we know when that token is going to expire. And to do that, all we do is we take the current time, which is datetime.now, and add 1 hour to that. So I don't actually think we used that. I ended up using that in my own code, so I'm going to get rid of that. As you can see here, I set the access token expiry in the local settings to datetime offset.utcnow.add hours plus 1. And the reason I did this is because I needed to compare the current time with the time stored in the database, and that was the only way I could do it. So then I output another message on the screen, access token obtained successfully, and then just output what the access token and the refresh token actually is. And then finally we take the user info response for the user info endpoint, which is the v3/user info, and we output the user info that we've received on the screen. Alright, so before we can actually connect to Google, we need to add some code into our connect to Google tapped event handler. So I'm going to paste this in, and again I will explain what it means. So I'm just going to clean up as I do. And then we will explain what it all does again. Alright, so as before, we display a message on the screen saying starting Google OAuth2.0 authorization. That's just to let the user know that we've started the authorization process. The next is just a couple of declarations, and the first one is generating a random base 64 string, which I believe has 32 characters. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I think it's a 32 character random encrypted string for the state. Again, the same for the code verifier, another random 32-bit string or 32 character string. And then the code challenge is encrypted with base 64 URL encoding, and then re-encrypted with SHA-256, and it's the code verifier that we generated earlier. So I think it's actually encrypted 3 times. So it's encrypted first of all with base 64, it's then encrypted again with SHA-256, and it's again encrypted once again with base 64 again. I don't know why Google does it like that. That's code provided by Google, not me. And then finally we set the code challenge method to SHA-256. Google must do some sort of decryption on their end, or re-encryption and decryption. I don't know how it works. Next we store the state in the local settings and also the code verifier. This is of course so we can restore it later or use it later on in the application or later on in the authorization flow. Next, again, we create another authorization request or another string using a string builder, and this time we use a response type equals code, because don't forget this is step 1 of the authorization flow. So first of all, we of course need to obtain a code. And here is where we declare our different scopes. So in this one, we're requesting the user info, the Google Plus login, the plus.me scope, which is the Google Plus account, the user info.email, and we don't actually need YouTube. That's just something I was using in my application. So we get rid of that, and then we just build the rest of the URL with the redirect URI, which is the protocol we created earlier, the client ID, which I will add in a minute off video, the state which has been generated, the code challenge, which is SHA-256, which has been generated, and the code challenge method, which is SHA-256. So we build that string, then we let the user know that we're sending the authorization request to Google and ask them to follow the instructions within the browser window. And then of course finally we open the authorization URI in the default browser. So we use var success equals launcher.launch URI async, and then declare a new URI with the authorization request, which is this. So the full URI, start with the authorization endpoint and then create the rest of the string after that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and add my Google API, my Google client ID, and then we will try and get this working. Okay, so with my client ID added as the string in the declarations, let's go ahead and debug this. And as you can see, we've got the connect to Google button here, and we've got the client output here. I've noticed that this goes white for some reason, don't know why, but we're going to go ahead and connect to Google. And if we load this back up quickly, you'll see that it says starting Google OAuth2 authorization, sending authorization request to Google, please follow the instructions within your browser window. And then we see the same page that we saw before on the Google API Explorer. As you can see, it says choose an account to continue to Easy Media Player. This is because this is my client ID. You can set your application name in the Google Developer Google Cloud Platform. That I will show you how to use later on. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click my default account, and as you can see, that straight away that's provided us with the information. It's provided us with the access token, the expiry time, which is 1 hour 3600 seconds, the refresh token, the scopes we've used, the token type, and the ID token. So below that you can see that it's provided, it shows us what the access token is, and it also shows us what the refresh token is. So you'll see that the access token and the refresh token are completely different, and it also tells us when it expires, which is an hour from now. And if we go to the current time, you'll see it's 23:52, and it expires at 12:52 on the 28th of December, which is tomorrow, well, an hour away. So that's all working. So next what we need to do is we need to actually show you how you can generate the refresh token to automatically regenerate a access token. So we're going to add another button here. So we're going to say, we're going to add this inside the stack panel so we can stack it up properly. We're going to move this button to here, and we're going to create another one. We're going to copy everything exactly as it is. Change that to horizontal. Change grid.row to 0 there. Remove those and set that one to right. And we're going to create a new one here called refresh access token. Okay, so now we've added the button to refresh the token. Now of course you would want to automate this in a live environment. So for example, every time the user loads the page, or every time the user loads the application. So just below the connect to Google function, we're going to create a new one, and we're going to say private void refresh access token object sender tapped rooted event args e, and then we have our function there which will allow us to use the refresh access token button. Alright, so inside the refresh access token code, I'm just going to paste the data here, and then I'll show you how to use it. Again, I'm using code that I've already created, so I just need to clean it up to make it work with this actual application. So we change the private void to private async void so we can run asynchronous tasks. And then we're just going to change everything to make it work. So we're going to change all these local settings so as the the text is correct, and then we're going to change these output scripts to actually output it to the right thing. So show message on screen. I'm going to copy that just to make it easier on myself. Alright, so let's just show you what we're actually doing here. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to check to make sure that the local settings contains a key called access token, which is stored using the code we've already created. And we're also going to make sure it contains a refresh token. Now the reason for that is because we need to send the refresh token to Google in order to obtain a new access token. So if the local settings contains two keys, the access token and the refresh token, we're going to declare a new string called refresh token and set that to the refresh token that's already stored in the local settings. We're then going to build another token request or a token request string, but this time we're going to set the grant type to refresh token. We're also going to set the client ID. I'm not going to hover over that because it will show my client ID. We're also going to declare the refresh token. So we're going to send the refresh token to Google. We're going to also send the redirect URI, which is of course the protocol. And then again we perform the string builder with the token request body, the encoding type and the post data type. We create a new HTTP client handler and a new HTTP client. So you'll notice a lot of this code is very similar to the first time we requested this, when we was requesting the actual access token. And this is because it's a very similar method using pretty much the same methods as the way we would use to generate the access token. We send it to the same URL, we send the same kind of data, but with a couple of different things changed. Again, we request a response from Google, and we store the response string in a string. Again, we pass the JSON object, the tokens, and obtain the new access token. This time we don't need to obtain the refresh token because we already have it, and we only need to store the access token and the new access token expiry inside the local settings. So we show the message on screen, new access token obtained successfully, show the new access token, show when the new access token expires. So if the access token does not equal null, so the token string, so if that's not null and it's not blank, so if Google doesn't return either a null or a blank access token, then we go ahead and store the access token and things into the database. If it does contain a null or a blank access token, we have to let the user know that we were unable to refresh the access token. Of course, all of this is wrapped inside a try and catch loop, and the reason for that is just so as the application don't crash if there is an error. If there is an error, it will just show the message on the screen containing the error message. So let's go ahead and run that. So because we already have the access token, we haven't uninstalled it, we already have the refresh token, we can go ahead and just click on refresh our OAuth token, and you'll see straight away it says new access token obtained successfully. new access token, and then it provides the access token there, and it also tells us when it expires. So if we uninstall this application, you'll see it's closed the application automatically. But if we've uninstalled it and then click on refresh OAuth token and they haven't already logged in, you'll see it throws an error. I don't think it outputted the error onto the... Sorry, I apologise. So, because we've provided an if statement there, we need to provide an else. Okay, so basically all we're doing there is telling the user that there's no access token, no refresh token currently found in the system, and they need to connect to Google first. There we go. So if we connect to Google now, you'll see it's just added those details down there, and we'll continue and go ahead with the code exchange. We have all of the information there that we requested, and now we can refresh the access token, and we can refresh that as much as we want, and you'll notice the access token changes every time, and also the expiry changes every time. So that is how we use the refresh token provided by Google to obtain a new access token. So next, the only thing left to do is just to show you how to actually generate a client ID. So we're going to go to console.cloud.google.com, and as you can see, I've got a shortcut link here. I'm going to blur all of these out so as you can't see them, but for now we're going to go to OAuth consent screen, and you can see we can add all of our details here. So the application name is what you see when you first log into Google, which is just there. So I can change that to whatever I want. There's also a logo. I'm not sure where the logo is used. I think I'm waiting for Google to update that. You can provide a support email. You can provide the Google scopes. Some of these will require authorization, and you can also provide your privacy and TOS links and things like that. So we go to credentials, and we select create OAuth client ID. Now it will ask us for the application type, and as you can see, there's nothing there for a universal Windows platform app. The only thing that will work properly is an iOS app. So the reason for this is because the way UWP and iOS applications work are very similar, and it uses the same kind of URL structure for redirects and protocols and things like that. So you create your name, you create a bundle ID, create a store ID and a team ID. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I will just show you my Easy Media Player one, and as you can see, the bundle ID is win.lacoda.emp. Now this of course needs to match everything what you type in on here. It also needs to match in your package.apex manifest inside the protocol declaration, and it also needs to match in your main page.xaml.cs in the string that we declared earlier. And that's pretty much it. That's exactly how you use the Google OAuth API and use it to obtain data, and it's also how you use it to refresh the access token, so you don't have to keep bugging the user to log in every hour. Alright guys, I hope you found this video tutorial helpful. I hope it was easy to understand. I'm not sure if you're going to understand it as well as I do. I don't understand everything. As I said, I've never used this up until a few days ago. So I'm not 100% on the terminology and things like that. I will provide a link to the code that I've used in this video tutorial down below. I'll also provide any relevant links which we've discussed in this video. As always, if you found this video useful, please consider subscribing and leave a comment and a like on the video if at all possible. It all helps. Alright, thanks very much for watching, guys. Until next time, see you later. Bye for now.